Oh, I definitely think the thing that I have been most struck by was, I'm going to steal Jeremy's answer right here, but on translunar injection day, before we did that translunar injection burn, give me a second for the technical, and then I'll get to the artistic. But we're 38 miles from Earth, and then we got to come down to just 100 miles from Earth and do that translunar injection burn, and then we head out to the moon. And just that entire time, I mean, you could look away from the window and then look back, and Earth was bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, Jeremy goes, I'm not sure if we're going to go around it or hit it. I mean, we're going right at the Earth. That translunar injection burn, we were just 100 miles up. That's not anywhere near the height of the International Space Station. We were under the International Space Station. They were just screaming right above the clouds, and that burn went off. And then just moments later, we look back, and we're already 30,000 miles from Earth heading to the moon. Like, blew us all away.
You know, Mark, I think one of the things that has struck me, there's so many amazing and so many profound things that we've seen and felt on this mission. But something else that just stays with me is a lot of us were excited to see Jeremy's expression or reaction to looking out at Earth from space, you know, being the first-time flyer. But the difference between Jeremy and someone who's never flown, but all of us, all four of us, and someone who's never flown is essentially equal. The three of us space before, I think, feel just as amazed to be up here and to see some of the sights that we've seen. And so even though we lived on space station for a collective 2 years, we have seen and felt things that we have never felt before, from that ride, that wonderful ride on SLS, to being that 38,000 miles from Earth and just seeing some amazing views.
You know, I think we've all been on a trip where we wish we had packed differently. Now that you're pushing deeper into space, is there something you left behind that you wish you had brought with you?
You're hearing a lot of brainstorming in the cabin right now. The resounding answer is we feel very well taken care of. There's not a whole lot we would live without. That typical forgetting your sunscreen or your bug spray on vacation. They thought of everything. We've got it all. My initial response was my family. I would love to have them up here, but then I might actually never come home. And yeah, I really can't think of much. The other joke was we think we had a radiation hit on one of our computers and took it down. So maybe we would have packed a spare computer. Other than that, we're just so well taken care of. In fact, so well taken care of that sometimes we forget. You can easily just get your presence here in the cabin and forget exactly where we are.
I want to ask a question for all the young people watching. Take Kruger Middle School in San Antonio. They are studying the science and the engineering of the moonshot, along with what it takes to be an astronaut. What is your message to all the kids watching and fascinated?
Yeah, I was sharing with some people yesterday, you need to identify your passions in life. We all are attracted to something out there that, just kind of fired up. And then just to recognize that everybody has something of value to offer. I mean, that is just a true statement. And we as humans, even the four people up here doing this, we have self-doubt. We've had it in our pathway as well. And so I know all those youth out there too are thinking, no, I can't do that. Every once in a while, you're going to have that. And so share your passions with others. You're going to be amazed at how they help you. They're on your team, and they're going to help you accomplish the things that you're interested in doing. And the reality is humanity needs those contributions. So just get after it.
Victor, I have one for you. Apollo 8 had a memorable Christmas Eve reading from Genesis. Do you have a message you'd like to share from space about Easter Sunday?
You know, I don't have anything prepared. I'm glad you brought that up, though. I think these observances are important, and as we are so far from Earth and looking back at, the beauty of creation, I think for me, one of the really important personal perspectives that I have up here is I can really see Earth as one thing. And, you know, when I read the Bible and I look at all of the amazing things that were done for us who were created, it's, you have this amazing place, this spaceship. You guys are talking to us because we're in a spaceship really far from Earth, but you're on a spaceship called Earth that was created to give us a place to live in the universe, in the cosmos. I think maybe the distance we are from you makes you think what we're doing is special, but we're the same distance from you, and I'm trying to tell you, just trust me, you are special. In all of this emptiness, this is a whole bunch of nothing, this thing we call the universe. You have this oasis, this beautiful place that we get to exist together. I think as we go into Easter Sunday, thinking about, you know, all the cultures all around the world, whether you celebrate it or not, whether you believe in God or not, this is an opportunity for us to remember where we are, who we are, and that we are the same thing, and that we got to get through this together.
Well, for someone who didn't have anything prepared, that was really quite extraordinary. Another question. During the lunar flyby, you're going to have radio silence for about 40 minutes. You'll be on one side of the moon. Everyone else on Earth will be on the other. You'll be focused on the mission. What do you hope the rest of us are thinking about?
I also haven't had anything prepared for that question, but I think things that come to mind for me are thinking about togetherness. When people talk about that Apollo 11 first moon landing, there's the two that landed on the moon, and then there's the one Michael Collins stayed in orbit, and he did orbits around the far side of the moon alone with those losses of signal. And people asked him the rest of his life what that was like. And in the end, for me, it leads back to gratitude. Gratitude that out of this huge universe, we get to live together on Earth, planet Earth, and what an anomaly that is. When I saw Earth for the first time on its own out the window, I was struck by the blackness around it. If you can just think about what it means to be together and what it means to be apart from your loved ones during that time and reflect on that, maybe we'll all come to a realization.
We've all watched a waxing moon from Earth. What's it like to watch the moon grow from space?
Well, before I get to the moon, something that I've just been really taken by is the waxing and waning Earth from our different perspectives. It's just been a little surprising to me. I just assumed it's sort of like the moon is consistent, you know, almost from day to day. You don't notice a huge change from one day to the next in how much of it is lit. But from, you know, 1 hour to a few hours later up here, we can see a completely different Earth as this orbit changes, especially when we are close to Earth. That was really surprising to me, from like crescent to full Earth. We woke up that first morning on TLI morning, it was a half Earth, then it was a full Earth, and then it was a no Earth. Yeah. This is really amazing. To watch the moon grow is exciting. That's our destination. That's where we're locked onto. When we're done with you today, we're going to get into some review of some of the science we're going to be doing and shifting our mindset to the Earth or to the moon. And I'm pumped to do some of those observations, some time up close and personal with the moon before we set our sights back at home.
And I'll just add, yesterday we were looking out the docking hatch, which is off the camera to the top side, and we were just starting to see the moon, and it just looked different. And we were catching glimpses of the far side, the side that you can never see from Earth, of Grimaldi, of Oriental. We were just starting to see around Grimaldi into that far. And as for humans who have looked at the moon our entire lives, it just looked different out the window, and that is wild. It just really put our place in the universe in perspective.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I think all of you should be grateful that Christina is such an expert space plumber. We'll see you when you get back.
We are. Thank you, Mark. It was great talking to you, and we are grateful. Take care.
Integrity. This is Houston ACR. Thank you.
Well, you've just been listening to what was effectively a bit of a news conference, actually, to outer space with the 4 astronauts heading there for the moon: Jeremy Hansen, Victor Glover, Reed Wiseman, and Christina Koch. I think Houston is speaking to them now. Let's listen in again. There they go. They seem to be relieved that that's over. And they were speaking there to Houston Mission Control, but before that to 2 of the biggest broadcasters in the United States, NBC and CBS, putting questions to them. With me in the studio are Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of The Telegraph, and Matt Stadler, broadcaster and commentator. Welcome both to the slightly different beginning to the wrap. Kirsty, if I can start with you, it was very interesting because a lot of the questions seem to focus on the moon, but the answers from the astronauts almost seem to focus on Earth and what it was like watching Earth from where they're standing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? 3 of them have been up in space before, and 1 of them is new to it. And it was really interesting listening to Jeremy Hansen say he hadn't factored in that much as we see the moon, and sometimes it's a full moon, sometimes it's a crescent. You get exactly the same effect when you're that close to the moon from Earth. And the other thing that really struck me about it, particularly as all we talk about these days in the news is how depressing and scary the world is how happy they were. Yeah. They looked so stoked and grateful to be up there. And when they were asked about the kind of, not the kind of day-to-day of it, but the sort of lessons they were learning from it, they talked about, you know, the importance of togetherness. And the picture on the front page of the Observer today is this beautiful picture.
Stunning, isn't it?
Of the Earth. And it just, I looked at it and just thought, gosh, it looks so peaceful from up there, doesn't it? But it really isn't from down here.
Yeah, because Matt, what I found interesting is, when they were asked, about the moon, they answered about the Earth. And I think it was Victor Glover who gave quite a spiritual message in a sense. He said, we should remember that the Earth was, well, he said, created for us, and its togetherness and its light and what is a lot of darkness around it from their point of view.
It was profoundly moving, I think, to see those astronauts talking to us back on Earth, particularly at a time of not just war, but multiple wars. We'll talk tonight about the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, the war against Iran that is being waged by America and Israel. And to get that perspective, I think, is so important. And you can imagine, I can't imagine actually being in space. I'd be terrified. One of the things that struck me was just how relaxed they were, as well as happy. I'd be completely terrified. But I imagine that if you are up there, it gives you just a totally different view of humanity and reminds you, almost, we know in reality it's very difficult being a human being, it's very difficult being a nation state, it's very difficult for all sorts of reasons, but it just reminds you that we are one species. And all the social media warring, the factionalization of our politics and so forth, and war itself is one thing, but then you sit up there, look back, and it gives you this different perspective.
Yeah, it was very touching and inspirational, I think, listening to them. Now, we are going to be hearing from NASA Mission Control, I think, in the next hour, so it'll be interesting to hear, what the official view from NASA HQ is about how the mission is actually going. But, Matthew, you mentioned a lot of wars here on Earth. Let's start talking about them, because eyeing the potential of a valuable propaganda tool, Iran is offering a reward of $60,000 to anyone who turns in an American who is missing behind enemy lines. The regime is racing against a U.S. search and rescue mission, which has already found the pilot from an F-15 fighter jet that was shot down over Iran last night. Well, in other developments, President Trump has reminded Iran of a deadline that he set to make a deal or open the Strait of Hormuz, warning all hell will rain down otherwise. Let's go live now to our U.S. correspondent, James Matthews in Washington. Let's start with this deadline, James, which Donald Trump, sometimes moves, sometimes doesn't. Where are we now?
Yeah, Barbara, Donald Trump, many rumors about what he was up to today, actually, but he has remained in the White House. We are assured, certainly a Marine has been posted outside the West Wing. That's the sign that he's in there. No golf course for him today. We have heard from him only on Truth Social, actually. A few hours ago, let me read you what he posted. He said this: "Remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal or open up the Hormuz Strait? Time is running out. 48 hours before all hell will rain," his spelling, "down on them. Glory be to God," he said. Now, that's in keeping with the rhetoric we've had from the president up thus far, but I'm not sure it maps a clear route towards any kind of end game, certainly in the short term. He is in a difficult spot. I do wonder, what does all hell raining down actually mean? Is he talking again about destroying civilian infrastructures? Because as we know, we have heard that before, and it does carry the sound of war crimes. It certainly risks turning the Iranian people against the US action. And of course, the Iranian regime would be reinforced by that. There is, Barbara, the faint sound from Tehran, actually, of negotiation. Interestingly, Iran's foreign minister has tweeted that they were being misrepresented, he said, by US media, and said he cared about a conclusive and lasting end to the war. It should be said the Iranians have also been goading the Americans relentlessly on social media. But, you know, in there somewhere, there does appear to be a will to steer this towards the negotiating table, whatever the prospect of success. Pretty slim at this stage. I think they are far apart. And of course, Tehran doesn't necessarily become easier to deal with as time goes on. And it surprises everybody, including itself and Donald Trump, with its military effectiveness. So I don't think we're any closer to putting down a clear and coherent US strategy. I would also say, Barbara, in the last hour, Trump has posted a video of what appears to be an explosion somewhere. He wrote that, well, he wrote this: "Many of Iran's military leaders who have led them poorly and unwisely are terminated, along with much else, with this massive strike in Tehran." So that's what he said. It's unclear exactly where that was. That needs confirmed, who was involved. But it does raise the question, when the Americans have already removed one tier of Iranian leadership, who is left to deal with, and have some of them been removed by what he's been posting on Truth Social?
So, James, the tough rhetoric continues from Donald Trump, but the U.S. hasn't had a great 24 hours, of course, because the search for a U.S. pilot continues whose plane was shot down. If he was captured by the Iranians, it would obviously be a propaganda coup for the Iranian authorities.
It would be, yeah. And the White House is muted on the situation regarding the pilot, which I think is unsurprising. I mean, the story of a downed U.S. jet is not the focus it wants right now. It doesn't sit well with the narrative about American superiority in the conflict, and it feeds the alternative narrative of an Iranian regime still in the fight, still punching above its weight, and still effective in terms of how it might shape how this all ends. It's a concern, clearly, for the Americans. We've spoken a lot about the propaganda value of a crew member who is captured by Iran, and how that would increase if, you know, they are paraded on TV and so on. Those of us who covered and were around during Gulf War I will remember John Peters and John Nichol, the two British pilots who were paraded on our TV screens. That put a human face on how war can go wrong. And, you know, that then was the biggest story of the conflict, actually, for a while. And in these circumstances, that can turn the public mood. So finding that pilot, retrieving them safely, it's the highest priority, clearly, for the United States right now.
James Matthews with the latest there from Washington, D.C. James, as always, thank you. And with me tonight, the political news editor at The Telegraph, Kirsty Buchanan, and the broadcaster and commentator, Matt Stadlen. Matt, if I can start with you. A lot to take in, this deadline that Trump has issued, but also, you know, the genuine worry about this crew member of the plane that was shot down, obviously for him personally and the family, but what it could do to the war.
Indeed, I mean, he rode back on his original deadline. This is a second deadline, isn't it? And it's very difficult to know what to believe when it comes out of the mouth of Donald Trump, because one minute he's saying to his European allies, go get your own oil, we don't need the Strait of Hormuz, we're not bothered by it. And now he's threatening all hell to rain down, misspelled, as we were just hearing, on Iran. These are fascinating words to be used by a man who told the world that he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. Clearly this is war. Clearly he is trying to be tough. But there is this deep and grave concern that there is a possibility of war crimes being committed, not just by America and Israel, of course, but by Iran. And let's be absolutely clear about this. Iran is a state that has sponsored terror in the Middle East for many, many years through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Houthi movement in Yemen as well. But yes, serious concern now about ongoing concern about how this is going to resolve, because even if Trump claims they don't need that oil, the fact that he is making these threats shows that he is taking it extremely seriously.
Yeah. And Christy, we're now in the second month of this war, and this famous off-ramp that we've been talking about for so long, it just doesn't really seem to materialize.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is going very, very badly for the US president. The timetable, the original timetable, which said 4 or 5 weeks, he's now saying at least another 2 or 3. So that has obviously shifted. The original objectives of the mission seem to have shifted too. He swings wildly between talking about negotiating a peace settlement and threatening to bomb them, what does he say, back to the Stone Age earlier on this week. So he's beginning to display signs of panic, I think, for me. He's firing people within his own administration. He's getting these very mixed messages. And I think we're getting increasingly concerned about what is the strategy here? Never mind the exit strategy. What is the strategy? What was the purpose of this? And how do you get out of it? And this airman, if he is caught by Iran, it's no exaggeration to say it could completely change the shape of what happens next in this conflict.
Okay, so all very depressing here on Earth. So let's focus again on the moon mission. And let's take you now to Artemis II mission control in Houston, Texas, where NASA is giving its latest updates on Orion and its 4 astronaut crew. Let's listen in.
I can tell you they've been incredibly busy. I know you've been watching coverage of the mission. I think you'll agree. It looks like they're really enjoying their work, and you know I can tell that in their voice when we're listening to the voice loops. And then all the imagery that we've been getting is pretty incredible. So the crew took this image yesterday. We got an image. Is it good? Come on up there. Stand by. So they took this image yesterday. On the far left, you can see features of the moon that have never been seen by human eyes. Until yesterday, only robotic imagers have seen this region of the moon. And then in the next image, you can see Commander Reed Weissman getting a view of the Earth from Integrity's window. That's quite a bit different than what he saw from the International Space Station. That's absolutely beautiful. From a mission management team perspective, we continue to meet daily to discuss status and get updates from the flight operations team, Orion, consider mission risk throughout all those conversations. We get an update on payload utilization and then discuss any anomalies and any necessary actions. Currently, coming out of the meeting today, we're working through a couple of items that you're going to hear more from Judd and Debbie. They can discuss those. None of those were any increase in mission risk or impacts to the mission. The team has not asked the MMT to take on any additional risk so far. As part of today's meeting, we did get an outbrief from the SLS team. You know, Judd said a couple of days ago that it looked like things went perfectly through launch, and the data certainly bears that out for SLS. The bottom line is the SLS rocket performance was, again, just like Artemis I, in fact, a little bit better right down the middle. And our insertion accuracy was within less than 1%. You know, I've talked off and on relative to things that are important to me throughout the mission, primarily with entry interface, right? Because that's the big one that gets us home and gets the crew boots back on Earth. But it certainly it doesn't go without mentioning that, you know, the first step in that is getting the rocket ready, and then the next step is having a SLS deliver the spacecraft to the point in space where it needs to be. And so it did that with 99.92% accuracy. That was a big bullseye, and I'm very happy about that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Judd.
Okay, thanks, John. Let's see, on the back half of Cruise Day yesterday, they performed a CPR demo just to figure out where would be a good spot in integrity to do CPR if they needed to do that. They had a public affairs outbrief. We also did a test of the search, acquire, and track mode of the Orion communication system. So that's if Orion, for some reason, loses its pointing knowledge, then it can go acquire communication with Earth on its own. Crew did check out of their med kits. They did some also a Nat Geo event there. They also had, we also did a DSN emergency comm test again to test out the ranging on the emergency comm system to make sure that was all working. Everything went well. Jeremy also had another CSA public affairs conference, planned medical conference. During the night, we tried to vent the wastewater tank that's attached to the toilet. We had problems with that due to suspected blockage, we think probably due to ice. So we directed the crew overnight to use their collapsible contingency urine devices, just like they did on flight day 1. Let's see, this morning we had our normal planning conferences. We also had the private family conferences and also the private psychological conferences that were planned. Additionally, we did we're going to do another test of the PWD and take videos of that just so we can get that data to the engineering teams. The planned trajectory correction for today, OTC-2, was canceled because, again, Orion is doing such a great job. We had great insertion accuracy. We had a good TLI burn. So we ended up canceling that. A benefit of canceling that, too, side benefit, it allowed us to put Orion space capsule in an attitude that will put sun on the vent of that wastewater tank to see if we can try to heat that up and get that wastewater vented. We were partially successful. We got about half of the tanks out of half of the urine out of those tanks. So we'll continue to troubleshoot on that. Later today, we'll do the manually piloting demo part 2, which will test out the 6 degree of freedom versus the 3 degree of freedom modes of the capsule, so we can get detailed information on how those behave. We'll also, the crew will videotape the exercise device so we can get engineering data on how that exercise device is working. We'll also do another VIP event for the Canadian Space Agency. We'll do some imaging, taking pictures out the window, and then the crew has their planned medical conferences. That's all I have, and I'll hand it over to Debbie, and she'll talk about the Orion systems.
All right, thank you, Judd. So yeah, I'm pleased to report that the Orion spacecraft, it's in very good health, continues to operate nominally on its way to the moon, so there's no major anomalies that we're working at this time. I'm gonna pull up the first image, if you could, of the exterior view of the spacecraft. So this is a beautiful view of the Orion with the sun shining off of that Ciox tape that covers all of those TPS backshell tiles. We actually yesterday performed a routine external inspection of the entire spacecraft to make sure that it's healthy for that return trip when it needs to come back home. And again, please report, found no damage to any tiles, no major tape removals or anything, so it looked really good. We did side-by-side comparisons to Artemis I. Actually looks quite a bit better than even Artemis I did at this point in the mission. We also, this image here, I guess I should mention, is from our optical communication system. So it's been downloading gigabytes of data throughout the mission. So this is one of the high resolution images that we got of Orion throughout the days so far. Let's see. We are still continuing to troubleshoot the urine venting, as Judd mentioned. I did have a partial successful venting after the maneuvers that Judd mentioned, getting some sunlight on that vent. The vents are located, the primary vent's located near that umbilical, that white block you see at the bottom there between the crew module and the crew module adapter. And so we think it's probably been seeing more shadow than anticipated. And so by heating that up, we were able to get some of the urine out, but clearly didn't solve the whole problem. So continuing to troubleshoot that. Should mention, this is a common occurrence. We saw these kinds of events on shuttle as well. So we have some tools in the toolkit. We'll be looking out on what else we can do there. The toilet itself is operable. This is a test flight. We're figuring out how all these systems work together, but it is operable, and we have redundancy to get us through the mission. Let's see. I guess we'll go to the next photograph. This is actually inside the spacecraft. It's maybe a little dark to see. We had the crew members turn the lights off or down low so they can actually take some really great images out of the windows. So I'm not sure if you can see, but I think Jeremy may be taking some photographs out the window, and Christina's back there working on the PC on her laptop computer. So anyway, a beautiful view of the inside. Most of the daytime pictures we see are really lit up, so it was nice to see the crew performing some of the other operations in the capsule. So I guess the spacecraft continues to operate nominally. Our team remains hard at work, making sure we're testing out all of the systems, getting through all the flight test objectives, and continuing to work the minor things that we have on our list. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Yeah, really pleased to be here today. We're now 2 days away from the lunar flyby, which is planned for Monday. So as we just heard earlier, the moon is now closer to the crew than the Earth is. So we're really gearing up to support the flyby. April 1st was an exciting day to launch because we have some really exciting observations planned for the day that the crew will actually fly by the moon. I actually have a visual video to show you guys of, in just 1 minute, the entire several-hour flyby. So if you could pull that up, that'd be great. When they start the flyby, they'll be able to see big chunks of the near side. That's the side that we can look up at night when they're observing the moon, and be able to see that near side as well. As they get closer, they'll start to focus on that near side, far side transition. Again, the far side is the side of the moon that always faces away from our own planet. So as they get closer, they'll be able to see features that human eyes have never before seen. Earlier, Oriental was mentioned. This was a really exciting scientific destination. They got eyes on it yesterday from pretty far away. They'll have an opportunity during the flyby to spend a lot of time checking it out. You see Earthset, that where Earth disappeared behind the far side of the moon, and you're about to see it pop out the other side, of course, in Earthrise. And then a really interesting opportunity we have for Monday's flyby is we will actually, from the vantage point of integrity, the sun will pass behind the moon from their perspective, creating a solar eclipse from a perspective that is very, very unique to this mission. It will be a roughly 53-minute eclipse, and then they'll see sunrise where the sun pops out the other side of the moon. There's a lot of science objectives baked into what the crew are going to be doing during the flyby. Those science objectives were developed by our lunar science team. I think we can go to a video of where the lunar science team is currently stationed in Building 30 across campus here in the science evaluation room. We developed a set of 10 lunar science objectives that were based on our lunar science and planetary science driving questions in lunar and planetary science. And as a result, we developed a targeting plan for the crew to follow on Monday. They're actually reviewing that plan today. They all have about an hour book kept on their timelines to review the plan for Monday. And we're looking forward to hearing their observations and ultimately, of course, seeing the photos that they downlink. The crew has spent many, many months training in a variety of different environments to make these really scientifically impactful observations. And so we're really excited as we're getting closer to the moon for all of this really wonderful lunar science the crew are going to be able to do for us. I'm excited to hear your questions.
Okay, great. So now we'll open it up for questions here in the room. We'll start here in the front row with Marcia.
Hi, Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. I'm sorry I have to ask some toilet questions.
Your mic's on.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, with some toilet questions, if you don't mind. I'm assuming right now the toilet's no-go for number 1, but okay for number 2. Sorry to have to ask this. And how many backup bags, do you have, the contingency pouches? Because I know you use so many to try to fill up with drinking water. So you got plenty enough of those, and how frustrated are you because you thought you got it fixed and here we are again?
Yeah, so the toilet it technically will work with number 1 right now, but we just want to keep the tanks half full right now until we figure out what's going on with the vent line. Absolutely, it'd still go for number 2. As far as the collapsible contingency urine devices, each crew member has 2 of those, but they can be either vented overboard, which we've proven that still works, or we could be collected in contingency water bags. But we don't anticipate that we'll have to do that since we can still vent those units overboard.
Thank you.
The urine tank that is in the vehicle is only about the size of a small, like your office trash can. So we want to make sure we can empty it out before we put anything else in there.
Thank you both. Next up, we'll take a question from Eric Berger.
Hi, Eric Berger, Ars Technica. 2 questions. I guess the first one's for Mr. Honeycutt. You guys come out here and everyone's sort of calm, and we see on the video things are calm. Can you just kind of take us inside the MMT or sort of behind the scenes and just talk about, is everything kind of as calm sort of as it appears? Like, is everything under control? Because, if I go back to sort of the shuttle days, it was kind of the same kind of thing, but behind the scenes, you find out that it's fairly frenetic. So I'd just like to get a little bit of sort of view of, because it looks like you guys, it looks like things are going really well. And then a question either for Judd or Debbie. You mentioned the 6 DOF and 3 DOF control tests today. For Artemis 3, Artemis 4, a nominal mission, how much of the flying on those missions will be manual versus do you anticipate it being almost all automated unless there's some kind of contingency necessary? Thank you.
Yeah, so, I've been accused of not worrying or getting excited about things and kind of even keel, and I see that in the rest of the team in the meetings every day. Now, we spent a great deal of time training, and the training team gave us some really hard things to work throughout training. And so I think it's a tribute to the amount we trained about and how good the teams are working together. So I've been very pleased with the way that the Orion team, the MER team, and FOD have been integrating across each other prior to coming to the MMT. So we got pretty crisp stories. So we've had some things to talk about. The MMT's asking good questions across the board. I think I'm getting really good answers from the technical teams that are in the room presenting. So I don't have any doubt at all if we run into something that gets a little tougher, I think things will still remain calm. I think the teams get ahead of it before they get to the MMT and generally come back with good recommendations.
As for your second question about manual versus automatic control on future missions, the anticipation is that most of the time the crew will be using automatic mode, but whenever we're trying to rendezvous with a target vehicle, that's the time that we would be using a manual mode so that we have that, visual cues to closing rates and things like that so that we can, rendezvous there. So I don't know, Debbie, if you want to expand on that at all.
No, I think that's pretty much covers it. I mean, I think part of the demo is really seeing how the handling qualities might degrade if you ended up in a 3 DOF situation versus 6 DOF, and we plan to fly in 6 DOF. So this is all about, like I said, a test flight, figuring out how this vehicle handles. And I think this manually piloting demo, we've got part of it coming up, and then there's another part later in the mission to just really understand how it works if they do have to take over manual control in any kind of situation.
Thank you. Next up, Joey Roulette.
Thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. I just wanted to quickly follow up on that question for Debbie. You said no major anomalies on this mission. Is there anything that you guys are tracking that are not typically major, I guess, but that were off nominal? And I'm also curious to hear, what everyone thinks about the internet's fixation on the toilet issue. The internet, they love space toilets for some reason. I'm just curious to hear, your guys' perspective on that and how you perceive that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think space toilets and bathrooms is something everybody can really understand. And we're flying it for the first time. Apollo didn't have that kind of technology in the vehicle, so it's always a challenge. They still have challenges on the space station with toilets. It's just a very complicated thing to accomplish. So some of the things we're seeing were not totally unexpected. The icing events is things we've seen before. So I think we've got ways to work through that. We just got to figure out how we can point the vehicle the way we need to. There's other constraints with pointing the vehicle for power generation and thermal protection of the vehicle. So how do all these things work together? And you can only test that once you get the vehicle up in space for the first time. So no issues there. Other small things, I just mentioned, there are a lot of little things we're working every day. I wouldn't say anything major. The crew did detect a kind of a smell coming from the UWMS or the hygiene bay area, but not a biological smell, something. So we're trying to figure out what could that possibly be. So we have analyzers on board, we can look, but we're not seeing anything off nominal in our power systems, our thermal systems. So, we'll be looking into that to make sure we can understand what that might be. I can't think of anything really else. There's like a lot of little things, but that's probably the only thing that we've got teams really looking into at this point.
I think the fixation on the toilet is kind of human nature, right? Everybody knows how important that is to us here on Earth, and it's harder to manage in space. So it's, I'm interested in it. I know we're in a good state right now, but I would really like for it to be in the best state that it can be for the crew's sake. They're kind of like, it's a little bit of camping in space already, but then it makes camping a little bit tougher when you don't have the full capability of the toilet. But, they're okay, and they're trained to manage through the situation.
We'll continue down the row with Irene.
Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Regarding the demonstrations on the proximity operations, rendezvous, and eventual docking with HLS, what's the current thinking when HLS is flying, whether Orion or HLS would be the active vehicle, which active, which passive? And then I had a separate question about Orion, considering this being the first flight of a crewed vehicle, compared to the other systems. There haven't been that many, a handful maybe. How would you compare this performance on the first flight with some of the previous Dragon, Starliner, maybe even Shuttle going back? Thanks.
So I'll take the first part. Whichever vehicle the crew's in will be the active vehicle. And so if Orion is rendezvousing with HLS, for instance, Orion would be the active vehicle. And then when they would come back from the moon, then HLS would be the active vehicle rendezvousing with Orion. As to your second question, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of information on some of the earlier or the more recent crewed vehicle test flights and things that they experienced. I would say Orion's performing remarkably well. So we are pleasantly surprised. We're hoping that this is what we were going to see, but we did fly a lot of redundancy in our systems in case we didn't. So as far as those comparisons, I'd probably have to defer to someone who knows more about what happens, directly in Dragon and those other vehicles.
Okay, our next question's here in the front.
Hi, Philip Sloss. One question for Judd. Are you going to plan on doing an OTC-3 burn, or is it possible to delete that as well? And then for Dr. Young, just to clarify, the eclipse, the 53-minute long eclipses, where is that in that 3-hour flyby window? Thank you.
So currently, OTC, the outbound trajectory correction number 3, we do plan to do that based on our current numbers. So, and we'll do that with the SM reaction control system.
And the eclipse, so the fly-by-day profile will look like a roughly 5-hour period where the crew is observing the moon. Like in the video you guys saw, they'll see the illuminated surface of the moon. And then a short time after Earthrise, we will kind of have a break in lunar viewing attitude where they'll be doing some other tasks before then pivoting back to look at the eclipse. So the 53-minute eclipse is roughly, you know, an hour after Earthrise at the end of the flyby window.
Thank you. Next up, Jackie.
Hi there, Jackie Waddles with CNN. Another question for Dr. Young. I just wanted to ask, because the president's budget request came out yesterday, and we saw another proposal to cut 47% of NASA's science budget. I just wanted to ask you, how are you thinking about how that changes the agency's science initiatives and even some programs that help support Artemis, even though I know Artemis had an increase in funding. And also would just love to know how that's affecting employee morale and what you're doing to kind of keep employees happy. Thanks.
Our briefing today is focused on Artemis II. Our budget numbers are available online at nasa.gov/budget. If you guys have any additional questions, you can reach out to Public Affairs after about the budget. Thanks. Let's go to another question in the second row. Yes.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com for Dr. Young. When we spoke back in September, there was a lot of uncertainty about what the crew would be able to see during the flyby coming up, and I imagine that kind of came down to the launch on April 1st. So I'm really curious, given that they're going through their targets today, their geography and whatnot, what you are hoping, I guess, to see, or what they're looking at the most in terms of what they have to practice, and then how do you keep them not looking at the moon outside of that 5-hour period as they're on approach and on the way out? Thanks.
Relatable question. Absolutely. So it was a really interesting challenge, and we did speak back in September about how to scope the flyby, given that, what targets will be visible to them are entirely dependent on when exactly they arrive at the moon, right? At any given moment in time, 180 degrees of the moon is illuminated and 180 degrees is not. And so what we did was we actually built a list of targets or features on the lunar surface for the entire 360 degrees of the moon, because we knew that once they launched and we realized when they'd get there, we'd be able to narrow down what was visible and from there prioritize based on our science objectives. And so as we were getting closer to this April launch window, we were building out that target list of how we would prioritize, launching throughout the April launch window. And then ultimately, of course, we launched on April 1st. So actually yesterday, the science evaluation room, the room that was showed earlier on screen, you can bring it up now again if you'd like, they were working to basically finalize that list of lunar targets that will ultimately go up to the crew and be executed on Monday. So what the crew are studying today is like the 80% solution. It's a study guide, and then tonight the final targeting plan will get uplinked to them, and they will review that prior to the flyby on Monday. And so we really, in that way, are able to maximize the science that we're getting out of the flyby by waiting until we know exactly when we're going to get there and maximizing the science out of that specific illumination profile that are presented to us. So I'll say that, the last part of your question about kind of where has the most effort gone into, I'd say we had done a lot of planning for months on the targets of interest on the illuminated lunar surface. The eclipse we really started to focus on in the last few weeks, and so we put a lot of effort into fleshing out those prompts, because ultimately the crew, to execute this plan, will be looking at their lunar targeting plan on their crew tablets and executing target by target by target based around prompts that the science team provides to them. So we put a lot of effort in the last several weeks into eclipse planning, in addition to continuing to flesh out the lunar targets in their own right.
We are going to take a few questions from our phone bridge next. If you are on the phone and you have a question, reminder to please press *1 to get into the queue. We'll start with Nell Greenfield-Boyce with NPR.
For taking my question. This is another science-related question. You talked about maximizing the science. Could you talk about, actually the science questions that you want to address, for example, with the eclipse? I'm not clear. Have people seen an eclipse like this before? And if not, what will the astronauts be able to contribute that would tell you something about, the sun? What are the actual science questions? And similarly, with the lunar targets, I guess, people on the street might feel like, well, don't we have a lot of pictures of the moon and orbiters and things like that? What are the actual questions? What is being maximized in terms of what you'll be able to know based on what the astronauts are doing? Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad somebody asked me about science objectives. Absolutely. We have, like I said, 10 lunar and planetary and solar system science questions for the mission that ultimately feed our targeting plan. So I'm going to take your question in two halves. The first part of your question was eclipse focused. Yes, Apollo crews saw similar eclipses, which again, in this context means that from the vantage point of the crew capsule, the moon is blocking the sun from view. What's different about the eclipse for the crew here is that, you know, for us, I don't know if any of you saw any of the total solar eclipses over the last few years. Actually, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the North American eclipse from 2024. What's unique about viewing eclipses from the Earth's surface is that from our vantage point, the moon and the sun in the sky appear approximately the same size. And that's why you can see that beautiful ring of fire when the moon moves, you know, takes center stage in front of the sun. Of course, Integrity has a much different view than we do. And so the moon appears much, much, much larger in their view than it does from us here on Earth. And so that's why in that visual you saw earlier, the sun appears as a relatively small disk. And that means that instead of the ring of fire eclipse that we see here on Earth, they'll actually see the solar corona, but only part of it. And so we have science questions designed around looking at solar activity at the time of the eclipse. And so they'll actually be able to make, you know, unique observations on Monday, April 6th, and what the sun is doing at the time. We've included prompts for them to describe the features that they can see in the solar corona, which can ultimately help solar scientists understand these processes in general, especially given the unique vantage point that the crew are going to have relative to our orbiting spacecraft here on Earth and our observers, our scientists here on Earth as well. Jumping to the second part of your question on just non-eclipse related science and lunar science, we took our driving science questions from our community documents, our Science Mission Directorate decadal surveys, which represent the highly prioritized science objectives that the entire community are driving toward. And what we did is prioritize them based on what Artemis II and our mission profile are really uniquely able to accomplish. For example, human beings are really good at making nuanced color observations. We have amazing camera data from, you know, decades of orbiting spacecraft, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, you know, I'm based at the Goddard Space Flight Center. I love LRO and all the data it's been able to tell us about lunar science. However, the human eye, especially when it's connected to a well-trained brain, which I assure you these 4 people have, are capable of just in literally the blink of an eye making nuanced color observations that Apollo observations told us can tell us something scientifically. When Jack Schmitt on Apollo 17 saw orange soil and he collected that sample, they launched back into orbit and saw that same orange hue from when they got from the surface to when they went to orbit. That told us something that volcanic processes were active on the lunar surface much more recently than we had expected before. We're looking for the crew to take time during their flyby, let their eyes adjust to what they're seeing, and call out any of those subtle color nuances, especially on the parts of the far side that have never been seen before by human eyes. And we're able to ask more intelligent questions because of what Apollo gave us and because of what those orbiting spacecraft provided to us. Another example, and I swear I'll stop soon, you've got me all excited about the science, is photometry. And that's essentially taking advantage of differing illumination conditions throughout the flyby. And so the analogy I like to give, and we actually ran this exercise with the crew in training, is imagine a sandbox. You know that when you go to the beach, sand is not perfectly flat. There's texture, there's different particle sizes. Turn off the lights in a room, look at that sandbox, shine a light shining directly on top of it. What you'll see is color. You'll see the shades of color and albedo on that surface. Take the same light source and move it to the side. You'll lose all the color nuance, but you will see topography and morphology. Comparing those two angles allows us scientifically to really understand lunar surface evolution. And though we can't move the sun in this mission, we can move integrity. And so by looking at the same targets more than once throughout their flyby, they'll be able to make observations about the same targets in different illumination conditions that would take some spacecraft days, months, weeks, years to build up. And the fact that they're able to see that in the duration of several hours can really help us dive deep on some of our really high priority driving lunar science questions.
Thanks, Kelsey. Next up, we'll go to the phone bridge. We have Lauren Grush with Bloomberg.
Hi, thank you so much. I think this question is for Debbie. I wanted to check back in about that isolated helium feed that was brought up yesterday. Just wanted to make sure that second line is still holding up okay. And I think I was a little confused about the answer that was given on the redundancy of that system if the second helium feed that's being used right now goes down. What did it mean that you don't need to regulate? I'm just wondering if I could get some more clarity on that. Thanks so much.
Sure, yeah. So as mentioned yesterday, I believe we did isolate one branch of our MON line as a part of the SM prop system. And we have not exactly determined what is happening there. We saw a little bit of pressure rise, which was higher than, or not in family with what we had seen in previous testing, and so we isolated that branch. The secondary branch is completely redundant and is completely operable right now, so we have no concerns about being able to operate the prop system. The remaining burns that we have actually don't require the helium pressurization into the MON system tank. The MON system tank is now holding an amount of helium that it already needs. It, backfilled the prop it already used up with the helium, so it's already primed and be ready to go for the remaining burns that we would need. If we did have an issue on that branch, we can always go back to the other branch. Using the other branch is not precluded just because of this item that we saw, this feature. We just decided to isolate that one and use from a health perspective, use the healthiest branch for any remaining burns. Those burns are really small. I'm sure Judd could speak more to what we have left to do, but that's why we said we don't need the helium pressurization anymore, because the MON tank already has the pressure in it that it needs to execute the remaining burns with, I think, 4 to 5 times more than we would actually need based on the predicted burns.
Yeah, I'll add, so the trajectory corrections that we have, we skipped the first 2. We got 4 planned remaining. Each one of those we budgeted maybe 30 seconds or so for, and we're really only seeing we only need, probably 10 seconds at most. And so we've got plenty of ullage is what we call it. So plenty of pressurization in the system to not have to use the helium, even if we had a problem with the secondary line.
And I guess I should also mention we are also protecting for an off-nominal type of abort situation. In that case, you may have to use a pressurization system, and the second branch is perfectly healthy to accommodate that as well. So we have not lost any redundancy or fault tolerance in our system. We just decided to isolate the one branch that we didn't like the behavior and proceed with the rest of the mission on the secondary branch.
We'll take one more question from the phone before coming back into the room. Next up is Joseph Howlett with Scientific America.
Hi, yeah, this is for Kelsey. I'm curious if there's a particular lunar feature or another that you're excited to get human eyes on. Is there something that in particular that you're looking or hoping for the astronauts to see? And then also, have they gotten photographs of any other celestial bodies besides the moon already, or is that planned for the next couple days?
Yes. If you ask, I don't know, 100 lunar scientists what their favorite features are, I'm sure you get 100 different answers. I think I'll maybe cheat and give a couple. I think Oriental is obviously extremely compelling. This is an impact basin that plays such a critical role in not just lunar science, but in planetary and solar system science. It's the type impact basin we use to understand impact processes across the solar system, which is one of the most ubiquitous processes across the entire solar system. And we've never had human eyes on by far the majority of it. I will say, a little bit closer to home, the crew is really excited about that target, and they're really excited about, understanding its significance in lunar science and planetary science. So I'm really eager to hear their descriptions specifically of Oriental, just given the excitement that the lunar science team has and that the crew has. We also, when we were training the crew, we gave them a Big 15 lunar geography challenge. So we gave them 15 features across the entire surface of the moon that at any given time, no matter when they launched and what the illumination was, they'd be able to see at least 5 of them at the time. And so if you can, know these 15 features, you will always be able to orient yourself on the moon. One of our targets that they'll actually look at twice on Monday is Ohm Crater. That was one of the Big 15. They've used it as sort of this, quizzing themselves. We actually literally made them flashcards for understanding lunar geography. And so I'm excited that Ohm made it into the targeting plan and that they'll actually get to see it twice under different illumination conditions. So there's a lot of Yeah, really exciting potential for the observations. And, frankly, what I'm the most excited about for Monday is hearing those descriptions starting to come down from the crew. They've practiced for many, many, many months on visualizations of the moon and getting their eyes on the real thing. Really, really looking forward to them bringing the moon a little closer to home on Monday.
Next up, Will.
Hi, Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you all for taking the time. Question for John Honeycutt. In your mission management chair role, we heard early this morning when the crew first woke up, early days, but it sounded like there may be some weather in the splashdown zone that's being watched at this point. I wonder if you can give us the assessment at this phase of the mission, how the splashdown recovery is looking. And then putting your SLS hat back on, you mentioned earlier in your remarks, the rocket performed pretty straight down the middle and even better than Artemis I. Even given that, are there some tweaks or finesses that you'd like to see between this rocket that just flew and the rocket that will fly on Artemis III? Thanks.
So I'll take the first question as far as entry weather. So it's a little too far out right now for our models to converge, but I'll tell you our meteorologists have been monitoring what we think the models are gonna do, and we're essentially in between two systems. And if those systems either speed up or slow down, then we might have a case where the weather might not be good in the San Diego area, and we might have to go a little bit more uprange into the Pacific. But again, those models it's too far out to know that. So we'll get better models Monday or Tuesday, and so that's when we'll plan to send the recovery ships to the proper staging area in planning for entry. And so, John, you want to talk about them? Yeah,
it's still a little bit early in the data review process, and so the numbers that I've got right now are based on the limited amount of data that we've got. I think the resolution will continue to get better, and if it points to something that we need to go do to change on the rocket, we'll go do it. And for instance, we had to we learned something in Artemis I, and we went and put the strakes on Artemis I, and they did their job fantastically. So, we'll be vigilant going through the data, and whatever the data turns up and we need to address it, we'll be ready to go do that.
Thank you. We'll take another question here in the room.
Hi, I'm Hanju Yang from Kookmin Daily in South Korea. My question is for John Honeycutt. And K-Rod Cube, the Korean CubeSat, carried on Artemis II, unfortunately failed to establish communication. And despite the setback, it was a meaningful first step for Korea's participation in an international crewed lunar mission. Looking ahead, what kinds of opportunity will future SLS mission offer for international partners like Korea to participate beyond CubeSat ride shares?
Yeah, so given where we are on the mission that is being planned for SLS and the architecture that the administrator and the associate administrator talked about over the last couple of weeks, I'm not aware of anything that they're doing. That doesn't mean there can't be something coming up. I would just say that the capability, if called upon, especially in the configuration that we're in for Artemis II, if it's needed, I think it'd be ready.
Next up, another question in the room.
Hi, Alejandro Turnbull from Space Scout. Over the course of today, we've heard that Christina might have had a little bit of issues with her computer, her personal computer, and just wondering if any of you could speak to what those issues were and what you're doing about them, and then also how you're going to take those learnings from that, as well as Reed's viral issue with his email from the early part of the mission, and apply those to future Artemis missions and personal computers on future missions.
Yes, so Christina's portable computing device, it failed. I mean, it's, a computer failure. But we still have three, that Reed, Victor, and Jeremy have, and so she's able to swap out and use, borrow their computers for any uses that she may have. As far as the email issues, again, that's just because we're not connected to the internet or to a sync all the time. We have to do manual syncs, and sometimes those files get corrupted. So I wouldn't say it's a real big issue. We got it corrected, and so it's not unlike issues that we see on the International Space Station. Sometimes we have to do some IT support, and I would say that's just nominal. We understand how to work those and carrying those forward.
Another question here in the room.
Hi, Katrina Miller from the New York Times. This question is for Kelsey. Can you clarify that there are parts of the moon that have never been seen by human eyes that will be seen by the Artemis II crew? And then I'm also curious if you have any words to share on the cultural importance of seeing the far side of the moon with human eyes.
The reason there are parts of the far side that have never before been seen, is before seen the near side was illuminated, because that's of course where the Apollo missions landed. And so for when Apollo astronauts were orbiting the moon, the far side they of course orbited over, but it was not illuminated when they were in orbit. Also, they flew much closer to the moon than Artemis II will fly, and therefore the horizon views of their space permit them to see the poles. And so we have a really unique vantage point with the Artemis II mission where the crew will actually be able to see the whole lunar disk. This means that they'll be able to see the poles, and they'll also be able to provide scientific context for their observations. Some of the really neat things about lunar surface processes, especially impact cratering, is they can toss material hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers across the surface. And because of this unique vantage point that Artemis II has, which is so much farther away than we experience with Apollo, they'll actually be able to provide context for those processes that are so influential across the entire lunar surface, where one crater in the northern hemisphere can shed material all the way down into the southern hemisphere. We're looking forward to the unique views.